Well, hello friends, I hope you're having a great day today. Hey man, this is Monday. God has given us a brand new week. We had such a great day yesterday in the house of the Lord. God just came and moved and ministered and blessed us with His presence in such a mighty way. Man, it's always so good to be in God's house. If you missed yesterday, you missed a great day in the house of the Lord. Now we got a brand new week in front of us now that God's given us. And so let's prepare our hearts every day to go out and be victorious in everything that God lays out in front of us. Now, we are talking about a brand new subject. Oh, let me do this. Before we get into that, let me remind you, I don't have an update on Pastor Judd Sessions as far as one for today. Just please keep his family in your prayers as he is dealing with this cancer issue in his life. Remember him and his family and Foley First Assembly of God. Just pray for them that God would move and work there. He needs a miracle. We know our God's able. That's what we are believing that God's going to do, is perform a miracle here that's going to turn that family, that church, that city there upside down for the cause of the kingdom. So please keep them in your prayers. Now, back to the matter at hand. We're dealing with a brand new subject today that we're calling the law of consequences. Now, last week, I know what we talked about. We talked about the consequences of spiritual neglect. That was consequences of one thing. What I want to deal with this week and next week is this thing we're calling the law of consequences, because it is a divine law that cannot be altered, it cannot be changed, it cannot be broken. God functions by this law of consequences in our life. That's how it functions. There was creation. Then there was consequences. You see it with Adam and Eve. And God laid out the consequences pretty plainly there for Adam and Eve. He told them, you can eat of every tree in the garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And if you eat of that tree, you're going to die. And that meant that you're going to die spiritually, and you were going to initially die physically, because mankind was created to never die physically, but sin brought spiritual death, it brought physical death, and it brought separation from God, because then Adam and Eve had to leave the garden. He told them, if you eat of it, you're going to die. That's the consequences. Well, Eve found herself around the tree. Number one, she should have never been around the tree, okay? There's no sense staying that close to something that you know is wrong. If you know it's wrong, don't go and build a house next to it. Don't go and pitch your tent next to it. If you know it's wrong, stay away from it. Put that thing from you. But she was hanging around the tree, and she began to look at it, and it looked good, because sin always does. It looked good to her, and she finally decided to take some of it after that old serpent had told her, now Eve, you know God didn't really mean what He said. Go ahead and partake of that. And she did, and whammo, they had to reap the consequences of it. And mankind still to this day is reaping the consequences of that decision that they made back then. There was creation, then there was consequences. This law of consequences God put into order. It transcends the Old Testament law. It transcends New Testament grace. It overrides those, and it runs by itself on a track next to it. And it functions in the Old Covenant. It functions in the New Covenant. And it's something that God orders things in our life by. And what we'll see when we look at the definition of consequence is that it orders good and bad in our life. Consequences do. They can be good or they can be bad. Let's look at the definition real quick. Consequences, number one, things that happen as a result of a particular action, choice, or set of conditions. And then number two, it is the aftermath, the after effect, the product, or the result of a decision to act. So every decision you make has a consequence, whether it's good or bad. Every decision you make, even if the decision is spiritual or something that pertains to something as common as everyday life and civil law, The decisions that we make on a daily basis are all followed up by consequences. That's how God has chosen to order our life. The good that happens, the bad that happens, He orders it by consequences. And so from the definition, you can see that consequences can be positive or negative. I know we say the word consequence, and that immediately we think of something negative. And as a matter of fact, if you look it up on the internet, you'll get more negative stuff than you do positive stuff. But consequence can be either or, and so we need to understand that. Now, I realize we readily believe in positive consequences. As a matter of fact, we probably call them benefits more than we do consequences. We readily believe in positive consequences today, and we do so because the results are good. We don't like to talk about these negative, I'll call them consequences, because the results are not good. And you and I both know it. I don't care how long you've been saved and how many verses of the Bible you can quote, whether you just read it for the first time or you've been reading it all your life. You and I both know we like good consequences better than we do bad. The thing is, we need them both in our life. The good consequences to bring blessing, to provide for us and take care of us and to show God's approval of our life. And we need the bad consequences, on the other hand, to help teach us a lesson so that we'll learn maybe not to do things that we've done again. And so that's why we need both of these in our life. Now this week we're going to try to break this thing down, and eventually, that's going to come next week, we're going to get into the life of David and look at the consequences of his life there. So hang out with me this week. Let's talk about this law of consequence that transcends Old Covenant law and New Covenant grace. And it's what God has put in our lives to superintend the good and the bad that functions in our life. I think you're going to be surprised that you find out the good and the bad that comes into your life most of the time happens off of decisions that we make. Hey, well, it's been good being with you today. I got to get out of here. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Tuesday's edition of Take 5. Until then, God bless you. Make right decisions, my friend. You want to reap good consequences and not the bad. Have a great day.